Today, we're going to study something to do with genetics. Genetics is what you receive from your parents. You receive something we call traits, the color of your hair, the shape of your nose. We're going to look at how those traits are passed on. They are passed on through some genes. One comes from your mom and one comes from your dad. We call what you look like the phenotype. That's what I see. But if I could see the actual genes, that's called the genotype. That would be the one gene from mom, one gene from dad. Sometimes those genes are a dominant gene, and if it's a dominant gene, we use a capital letter. Sometimes those genes are recessive, meaning it takes two of those genes to show up. For the dominant, it only takes one of those genes to show up. Let's look at some examples. If I had two capital L's, would that be a dominant or recessive trait? The genotype being LL, two L's. That would be, of course, a dominant. If I had two little d genotypes, that would be a recessive. But if I have one B and one little b, a dominant and a recessive, then what we would see is only the dominant trait. So we're going to look at these 7 things. We're going to use these letters, capital L's or lowercase l's, capital T's or lowercase t's. So I'd like you to take out a piece of paper and you're going to copy these 7 down. Pause it now and copy them down. I'm moving on. Let's look at your hair color. If you are naturally blonde, you have 2 recessive traits. If you have any other hair color, you have a dominant trait. Write that down on your sheet. Straight hair, curly hair. Straight hair is 2 recessives. Let's look at tongue curling. If you can curl your tongue. If you can curl your tongue, 2 dominants. If not, 2 recessive. Look at your hand. Look where I'm pointing to. Do you see any hairs there? If you do, you have mid-digit hair that's 2 capital M's. Going to the next trait, are your eye color. If you have blue eyes, you have 2 recessive traits. Any other mixture of eye colors, 2 dominant. Do you have a widow's peak? Pull back your hair and have somebody look at your hairline. If it comes to a V, a point in the middle, then you have a widow's peak. That's 2 dominant. Look at your little pinkies. Hold them side by side. Do they form straight together? Then you have 2 recessives. Or if they curve near the top or halfway up and they curve away, then you have a dominant trait. Now, look at this wheel. You're going to pause and you're going to fill out the wheel, starting from the inside to the outer one. If you started with 2 little traits, you'd fill in the top one. If you had a dominant one, you'd fill in the bottom one. I had the top one here. Then I go to the next part of the wheel that touches. I had 2 recessives. I'm going to fill in this one. Then I go to my next trait. I also had 2 recessives. I go to that one. And I keep going out on each trait until I get to the very end of the wheel and I get a number. Write that number in the middle. Now, let's see how you compare to your classmates from last year, unfortunately. Take your number and we'll look at this. This was period 1A's. You can look at their data, see how you compared. Or you can go to each of my other classes from last year and see how you compared. Remember, these are traits passed on to you from your parents, and what you don't see is the letters that you get from your parents. That's called your genotype. What you do see is your phenotype. I hope to see all your phenotypes back in the classroom soon. Bye-bye.